Undercover boss orders breakfast at restaurant, stops cold when he sees who's washing dishes. If you want to know whether a system is still breathing, listen to the sounds from the kitchen, not the reports. Wednesday. The air is cool. The suburban branch of New Dawn had only been open for 15 minutes, but everything already moved like clockwork, steady, precise, and quiet. Not exactly lacking professionalism, but there was something missing. Nothing felt like a dawn. Every step, every greeting was just right, yet lacked that spark of humanity. A man walked in wearing a wool coat, a low baseball cap, round-rimmed glasses that disguised the eyes more used to reading revenue charts than kitchen lights. No one recognized him, and he didn't want to be recognized. Michael Foster, 50 years old, founder of the New Dawn chain, who once started out with a street coffee cart, now sat quietly inside his own restaurant, disguised as an ordinary customer, holding a menu he knew by heart down to every period. He ordered a simple egg toast and a cup of hot tea, the kind he used to drink with the kitchen crew back before they had even opened a second location. He picked a table in the back corner, one with a clear view of both the kitchen and the front of house. Not to monitor productivity, not to question sales figures, but because over the past week, he had received multiple reports stating this branch was operating smoothly. And that was exactly what worried him, because smoothly is often the word used to cover up what no one dares disturb. There are faces that should only appear behind the kitchen door if it's to be honored, not forgotten. Just as Michael took his second sip of tea, the stainless steel kitchen door creaked open, the soft clink of ceramic plates echoed, and he turned his gaze. And then he froze. Through a cloud of steam, under the harsh glow of cold fluorescent light, stood a lean but sturdy figure. Shirt sleeves rolled high, a worn collar soaked through, and hands scrubbing dishes slowly, deliberately, leaving no trace of grease behind. Michael squinted, focusing in. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then he gently set his fork down on the plate, his heart skipping a beat. That man, it couldn't be. But those eyes, those hands, and the small scar on the left elbow, it was Martin, 67 years old. Once the regional operations director of the Western Division, the very man who stood shoulder to shoulder with Michael in the early days, growing New Dawn from a single shop into a network of dozens of branches. Martin had retired 3 years ago with gratitude, a farewell party, flowers, and a touching speech. So why was he standing there, silently washing dishes like a part-time after-school employee? Michael felt the entire space blur around him, not because of the kitchen steam, but because of the storm of questions rushing in all at once, like thick fog. What happened? Why did no one report this? And what part of this system allowed a man who once held its highest ranks to return in the quietest way possible? The breakfast in front of him suddenly tasted bland, and the kitchen door opened just a little more, enough to reveal a truth that every report had missed. Some people don't return to ask for anything. They come back simply to remind us how we once began. Michael didn't leave the diner after breakfast. He ordered another coffee not to enjoy, but to have an excuse to stay, observe, listen, and wait. Each time the kitchen door swung open, his eyes followed that familiar silhouette. Martin worked as if he had never left, washing dishes, drying them, stacking each one neatly, every movement as precise as when he used to oversee an entire region. By midday, Michael quietly stepped up to the counter and ordered dessert. Not to eat, but to speak with a young kitchen staffer who had just come out from the back. That older gentleman, who is he? The staffer looked toward the kitchen, then replied softly, almost as if afraid to be overheard. Oh, Mr. Martin, he's not an official employee. He just drops by some days, asks to help wash dishes. Michael furrowed his brow. Asked to? Yes, sir. He said this used to be his place, and he cares deeply about it. Said he was worried us younger folks wouldn't understand the old spirit, so whenever he has time, he just comes in to help. The answer weighed heavily on Michael's heart, not because Martin was washing dishes, but because Martin didn't need to wash dishes. He was simply trying to preserve something that might be fading away with time and the ever-growing expansion plans. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He sat by his office window, reopening old photos from the launch of their very first location. Martin, white shirt, radiant smile, standing beside him in a cramped kitchen. Back then, they had nothing but a shared belief. Customers need warm food, but employees, they need a warmer heart. And now, one of the very men who laid the foundation was coming back without title, without requests, just to preserve the spirit. And Michael, the man who wrote that very philosophy, had missed it. Countless detailed reports, countless strategic meetings, but no one reported that there was someone out there wiping every dish, as if that were the only way not to be forgotten. Michael tightened his grip on the photo in his hand. He knew what needed to be done next wouldn't be found on paper. It had to start from where Martin was standing, from a corner of the kitchen, where each dish was washed with the memory of their original faith. Under the soft yellow glow of the late-night office, Michael flipped through photos and old plans, milestones of New Dawn over the years. The upper floor was now a gleaming executive hub where everything was tracked through dashboards and data. But somewhere, the soul of New Dawn had slipped out of the coverage of those reports, a soul that once began in a small kitchen filled with laughter at 5 a.m. He placed the photo of Martin in that old kitchen on his desk. Martin's eyes in the picture, they weren't the eyes of a man washing dishes. They were the eyes of someone tending to a beginning. Michael picked up a pen and wrote a single line on a small note. No one should wash dishes to be remembered. They should be remembered so they no longer need to wash dishes. The next morning, instead of heading to the office, he returned to the branch. This time, no disguise, no hiding. He walked straight into the kitchen where Martin stood, apron on, hands wet, gently wiping a porcelain bowl with a crack in it. Martin looked up, stunned, then smiled softly, like a man who didn't need to ask, because he already knew. "I knew one day you'd come back," he said, voice low but warm. "Just didn't expect it would be from behind the kitchen door." Michael nodded, not hiding his emotions. "I forgot. Sometimes the spirit of a place isn't found in the system. It's in the hands of those who quietly preserve it." Martin took off his apron and placed it on the shelf. "I didn't come back for recognition. I just feared the young ones might forget why we once named this place New Dawn." "I understand now," Michael replied. He looked around the kitchen. Everything was running smoothly, yet something was missing, meaning. And the man who had just wiped that cracked bowl had silently preserved that meaning with his own hands. Michael turned to Martin, handed him an envelope, and said, "Starting tomorrow, you won't need to wash another dish. But I hope you'll teach what you just did to those who'll stand here after us." Inside the envelope was an offer for a new role, Advisor for Operational Heritage, New Dawn. No longer the man drying plates, but the one who safeguards the soul, a position that didn't exist in the system until Mr. Martin stepped back into the kitchen and reminded everyone, the roots of everything lie in what no report can ever measure. No one who laid the foundation should ever appear as a shadow behind the kitchen door. Monday morning, clear skies, gentle sunlight. The New Dawn branch, the very first, opened as usual. But today, amidst the familiar clinking of cutlery and greetings to regulars, something different was about to unfold. Michael walked in, no longer the man in the low baseball cap from the previous visit, but the founding CEO in a refined gray suit and a gaze full of clarity. The room seemed to pause for a moment. He walked to the center of the restaurant, nodded politely to the shift manager, then said, "I want to meet with all staff here, right now." In a small meeting room at the back, every team member stood around the long table. The door closed, and within minutes, things once thought unnoticed were shown publicly. A video clip from the security camera, Mr. Martin, 67 years old, head bowed, washing dishes one by one. No one asked him to. No one hired him. He just helped build this place, and he's still keeping it in his own quiet way. Michael turned around, scanning the room with his eyes. "I'm Michael Foster, and I've come back not for profit, but because something more important has been left behind." Insult. Then he announced 3 immediate actions without waiting for board approval or formal documentation. 1. Effective immediately, Mr. Martin will no longer be allowed to work unofficially. He does not need to prove his loyalty any further. 2. He is officially granted the title of Honorary Advisor for Corporate Culture, not as a task but as a recognition, from system to heart. Sen. The launch of the Founders Tribute Fund, a program to acknowledge the contributions of retired team members who helped lay the foundation so no one is ever forgotten in the place they once believed in. Michael looked around, pausing longer as his eyes met Mr. Martin's, who stood quietly in the back. A system with no memory is a system with no future. No one who helped build New Dawn should be seen as a shadow behind a kitchen door. From today onward, those who gave this place its spirit will be named, rightfully and respectfully. No one spoke. But in that silence, something had shifted. That morning, New Dawn began to remember what it was truly built for. After the announcement, the room remained quiet. But as Michael stepped outside, something subtle yet profound began to ripple. A young staff member, Leo, a kitchen helper, quietly approached Mr. Martin, who was still standing alone in the hallway. He gently said, "I didn't know who you were, but the way you washed each dish, we knew you love this place more than any of us do." Martin smiled the kind of smile only someone who no longer needs to hear thank you gives, but still feels moved when someone remembers. That evening, across other New Dawn branches, an internal email was sent. "We're not just expanding by the number of stores. We must also expand our collective memory. If you know someone who helped build New Dawn and is quietly fading from our story, tell us. Let us listen. Let us honor them." 3 days later, at the main lobby of New Dawn's headquarters, a new plaque was installed, not of glass or stainless steel, but of raw wood, with every grain line bearing the mark of time. Its name, "Those Who Built the Dawn." Right at the top, engraved clearly. Martin Ellis, founding operations director, retired, still serving, still remembered. And below that, more names began to appear not for their rank, but because they once believed. Michael stood quietly before the plaque. Beside him was Mr. Martin. They said little. But in Martin's hand, a worn kitchen towel, freshly laundered and neatly folded. He placed it behind the glass panel below the plaque, with a handwritten note. "This was what I used every morning. Not just for the job, but to keep the spirit of this place as clean as the day we began." Michael nodded. No more words were needed. Because from that moment on, New Dawn was no longer just a restaurant chain. It had become a memory named at the right time, in the right way. And the hands that once dried the very first plate would never be forgotten again. Some foundations are not made of concrete, but of memory. 2 months later, in every New Dawn branch, next to the service counters, a small section was added, "The ones who laid the foundation." No flash, no gold frames, just a simple wooden plaque with black and white portraits. Below each, a short story about someone who once worked there, who sowed the first seeds of value with their own hands and hearts. At the very first branch, where it all began, the top photo is of Mr. Martin's silver hair, a gentle smile, standing beside an old stainless steel sink. The small inscription below reads, "He didn't come to wash dishes. He came to preserve what's right by quietly drying each plate." Mr. Martin no longer works in the kitchen. Instead, every Monday and Friday morning, he sits in the training room at the central branch, telling stories to new employees. He doesn't teach technical skills. He doesn't talk about KPIs. He simply opens an old notebook, turns each page, and begins with a day from 20 years ago. Back then, we had only 6 tables, 1 gas stove, and one thing no one could sell: the belief that good people deserve to be treated right, starting from the first meal of the day. The young employees sit in silence not because they're told to, but because for the first time they realize they're not just standing in a restaurant, they're part of a system, one that was born from people to serve people. One morning, Michael returned to the old branch. The table by the window where he once sat in disguise was still there. On the table, there was no coffee, only a folded piece of paper, neatly placed under a ceramic plate. "Thank you for looking back to where the quiet ones never really left." Michael opened the note, slowly reading each line. He didn't need to guess who had written it, he knew. Only one person still wrote with such simple, yet profound sincerity. He didn't tuck it into his wallet. He gently folded it again and left it on the table, as a reminder to himself, never forget what helped you begin. 1 month after the foundation builders' plaques appeared, an email was sent across the entire system with a simple subject line, "We're looking for your untold story." The content didn't ask for long essays. There were no complicated forms, just a gentle invitation. If you've ever seen someone quietly uphold the values here, even if it was just a reminder, staying late once, or a smile that made a guest stay, tell us. Don't let beautiful memories live only in private minds. The HR inbox soon filled with recollections from former managers, ex-employees, and even longtime customers. One person shared about a chef who once used his tip money to buy shoes for a new intern. Another told of a parking attendant who quietly held onto a little boy's apology for breaking a glass just so the child wouldn't be scolded by his mother. Each week, One story is printed on the supplementary menu that comes with the receipt placed on every table in the New Dawn system. No names are credited, just 3 small words at the bottom. Still remembered. At the central branch, a small digital board was installed, displaying 1 sentence per day. Kindness doesn't need to be registered, but it does need to be recognized. Next to it, a single button. Anyone, a customer, staff member, or intern, can press it to submit the name of someone they want to thank for a small act of kindness. And each week, one name is selected and added to a miniature honor board in the staff break room. One time, that name was Martin, for drawing the memory of a system that nearly forgot where it began. At year-end, when the system-wide appreciation ceremony was held at the main hall, Martin did not sit in the seats of honor. He stood backstage, holding a backup microphone. But when the spotlight turned toward the stage, the MC unexpectedly called his name. Michael, already waiting at the podium, invited Martin up, not to receive a commemorative award, but to say one simple thing: if there's one thing I wish every system would preserve, it's this: a dishwasher kind enough to return, and a founder awake enough to notice.